The death of restraint, Trump's strike on Iran did not unleash unrestrained American power. It revealed something more unsettling, a superpower that no longer believes restraint works. On February 28, 2026, American aircraft crossed a threshold that generations of presidents had approached but declined to breach. In coordinated operations conducted alongside Israel, United States forces struck deep inside Iran, targeting nuclear facilities, military command infrastructure, and, decisively, the country's supreme political authority. Within hours, intelligence assessments concluded that Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, was dead. The military success appeared undeniable. The political meaning, however, remains profoundly contested. Supporters hailed the operation as proof that American power, long constrained by diplomatic caution and post-Iraq trauma, had finally been liberated. Critics warned that Washington had shattered one of the last remaining norms governing interstate violence, the unwritten prohibition against assassinating a sitting head of state. Both interpretations misunderstand what occurred. The strikes did not inaugurate an era of unrestrained American dominance. Nor were they merely another episode in the long chronicle of Middle Eastern intervention. Instead, they marked something subtler and potentially more consequential: the quiet abandonment of a strategic philosophy that had governed American power since 1945, the belief that legitimacy and restraint strengthened hegemony more than raw force. America did not suddenly become more powerful in February 2026. It simply decided to behave as though limits no longer deserved respect, the taboo that survived the Cold War. For 80 years, American presidents operated under an oddly durable constraint. The United States overthrew governments, invaded countries, armed insurgencies, and imposed economic sieges of extraordinary severity. Yet it avoided directly killing foreign political leaders. This restraint was never moral purity. It was a strategic calculation. During the Cold War, assassination carried unacceptable escalation risks. Killing Soviet or Chinese leadership figures might trigger nuclear retaliation or uncontrollable confrontation. Even against weaker adversaries, eliminating heads of state risked transforming limited conflicts into existential wars. Thus, Washington learned to pursue regime change indirectly. Iran's prime minister fell in 1953 through covert manipulation rather than targeted killing. Chile's Salvador Allende died amid internal upheaval rather than American missiles. Saddam Hussein survived the Gulf War despite being the clear architect of aggression. NATO aircraft hunted Muammar Gaddafi's forces in 2011 while officially denying any intention to kill the Libyan leader himself. Even as events made his death inevitable, the pattern was consistent. America removed regimes but preserved legal fiction. Leaders fell as consequences of conflict. Not as deliberate targets. The distinction mattered because it preserved a boundary between warfare and political execution. International order depends less on written law than on shared habits of restraint. One such habit held that sovereign leaders, even hostile ones, were not personal prey. The strike on Khamenei ended that ambiguity. The long evolution of targeted killing. In fairness, the taboo had been weakening for years. The drone wars following September 11 transformed assassination into routine counterterrorism policy. The killing of Osama bin Laden in 2011 enjoyed overwhelming domestic approval. The 2020 strike against Iranian General Qasem Soleimani pushed further. Targeting not a terrorist fugitive but a senior state official operating openly under national command, each step expanded acceptable practice while preserving a crucial distinction. Targets were military or non-state actors, not national rulers themselves. By 2026 that distinction appeared increasingly artificially. Modern authoritarian systems blur military and political authority. Supreme leaders command armies, generals shape state ideology, intelligence chiefs function as policymakers. From a purely operational perspective, leadership decapitation promises efficiency unavailable through conventional war. President Donald Trump embraced that logic with characteristic directness. Why fight prolonged campaigns, deploy occupation forces, or attempt democratic reconstruction when technological superiority allows elimination of adversarial leadership at comparatively low American cost? Why repeat Iraq when precision weapons offer shortcuts? The appeal was obvious. The risks were less so: intervention without responsibility, Trump's Iran strategy reflected a broader transformation in American strategic thinking, intervention divorced from ownership, the failures of Iraq and Afghanistan produced bipartisan aversion to nation building. Yet American global commitments remained intact. Policymakers therefore sought methods capable of producing decisive outcomes without long-term entanglement. Leadership decapitation appeared to offer precisely that solution: remove the regime's organizing intelligence. Trigger elite fragmentation. Allow internal forces to complete political transition. Withdraw before instability becomes America's burden. It is an attractive theory. It also rests on questionable assumptions about how political systems survive violence. Authoritarian regimes, particularly revolutionary ones such as Iran's Islamic Republic, are designed to withstand leadership loss. Power resides not solely in individuals but in networks, security services, clerical institutions, patronage systems, and ideological narratives forged through decades of perceived siege. The death of a leader can weaken such systems, but just as often it radicalizes them. History rarely rewards those expecting societies to collapse neatly on schedule. The myth of decisive force, the immediate aftermath of the strikes exposed the limits of technological victory. Iran retaliated through missile attacks, proxy mobilization, and maritime disruption across the Gulf. Oil markets convulsed. American bases entered heightened alert. Regional governments scrambled to contain escalation while officially supporting Washington's objectives. None of this resembled surrender. Decapitation strategies promise psychological shock sufficient to paralyze adversaries. Yet modern states possess bureaucratic redundancy precisely to avoid such paralysis. Succession mechanisms activate. Security elites consolidate authority. External aggression strengthens internal legitimacy. Indeed, regimes often become more dangerous immediately after leadership loss, as competing factions attempt to demonstrate resolve. American planners understood these risks. The decision to proceed nonetheless suggests not confidence in easy victory but impatience with incremental deterrence. The strike was less an expression of limitless power than a wager that decisive violence might succeed where containment had stalled. A superpower tired of waiting. Behind the operation lay a deeper frustration shared across Washington's political spectrum. The sense that adversaries increasingly exploit American caution. Iran advanced nuclear capabilities despite sanctions. Russia endured economic punishment while continuing war. China expanded influence without direct confrontation. North Korea perfected missile technology under decades of diplomatic management. The liberal international order promised gradual convergence toward stability. Instead, rivals adapted. Trump's response was brutally simple. If deterrence fails slowly, escalate quickly. The killing of Iran's supreme leader therefore represented not impulsiveness alone but a strategic argument. Restraint encourages defiance, fear restores credibility. Whether that argument proves correct remains uncertain. But its adoption signals profound change in how American leaders interpret power itself. From liberal hegemony to punitive hegemony, for much of the post-Cold War era, American dominance rested on persuasion as much as coercion. Institutions, alliances, and economic integration allowed Washington to frame its leadership as mutually beneficial. Force existed, but as an enforcement mechanism rather than organizing principle. The Iran strike suggests movement toward a harsher model, what might be called punitive hegemony. Under this approach, compliance derives less from shared norms than from demonstrated consequences of resistance. Military action becomes communicative theater, proof that distance, sovereignty, or institutional legitimacy offer limited protection. America is no longer inviting participation in an order. It reminds opponents of hierarchy. Such signaling may deter some adversaries. It simultaneously encourages others to accelerate asymmetric defense strategies, particularly nuclear deterrence. The nuclear lesson others will learn. The most consequential audience for the strike was not Tehran but Beijing, Moscow, and Pyongyang. For decades, weaker states inferred an uncomfortable lesson from American interventions. Regimes lacking nuclear weapons were vulnerable to coercion or removal. Iraq and Libya reinforced that conclusion. The killing of a sitting head of state strengthens it dramatically. If even sovereign leadership is targetable, survival increasingly depends on credible retaliatory capability. Nuclear weapons have become not tools of aggression but insurance policies against decapitation. Thus, an operation intended to reinforce deterrence may erode non-proliferation norms. Great powers often discover that demonstrations of strength produce strategic imitation rather than submission. The erosion of precedent. International order functions through precedent accumulation. Once actions become thinkable, repetition follows. Washington historically resisted leader assassination partly to preserve reciprocal restraint. By crossing that boundary, America implicitly legitimizes similar behavior by others. Future conflicts may now involve explicit targeting of political leadership. Russian calculations regarding Ukrainian command structures, Chinese contingency planning toward Taiwan, regional rivalries in the Middle East and South Asia, none require moral equivalence to become strategically plausible. Norms erode asymmetrically. Once weakened, they rarely recover intact. America has gained operational flexibility at the price of institutional predictability, maximum capability, diminishing control. Paradoxically, the strike illustrates the central dilemma of modern American power: overwhelming tactical superiority paired with declining ability to shape political outcomes. The United States can destroy infrastructure anywhere on Earth. It struggles to determine what replaces it. Military dominance compresses decision timelines while political consequences unfold slowly and unpredictably. Precision weapons shorten wars' opening phases but lengthen their aftermaths. The elimination of Khamenei solved an immediate strategic problem while creating an indefinite geopolitical question. What political order emerges in Iran now? Superpowers excel at beginnings. They rarely control endings. Domestic politics and strategic spectacle. The operation also reflected domestic incentives shaping contemporary foreign policy. American voters increasingly demand decisive action without prolonged sacrifice. Casualty-averse societies reward visible strength yet punish extended commitments. Precision strikes satisfy both impulses. Dramatic success without mobilization. Foreign policy becomes episodic spectacle rather than sustained strategy. Trump's political instincts align closely with this environment. Demonstrations of force provide clarity absent from diplomatic ambiguity. Success is measurable in destroyed targets rather than negotiated compromises, yet adversaries do not share electoral calendars. They absorb shocks, wait, and adapt. Strategic patience remains unevenly distributed. The illusion of restored dominance. Claims that the strikes herald an age of unrestrained American power misunderstand the nature of constraint in international politics. The United States faces few military equals but numerous strategic limits. Economic interdependence, alliance management, escalation risks, and domestic tolerance for instability. Power is constrained not only externally but internally. Indeed, reliance on decapitation strategies may signal recognition that traditional instruments, occupation, reconstruction, ideological persuasion, have become politically unsustainable. America appears freer to strike precisely because it is less willing to govern consequences. Unrestrained action can coexist with constrained outcomes. Strategic impatience as grand strategy. Viewed historically, dominant powers often adopt riskier methods when incremental management fails to produce desired results. Late Imperial Britain embraced punitive expeditions. France relied increasingly on coercive demonstrations in its colonial periphery. The Soviet Union oscillated between détente and sudden intervention when influence slipped. Such behavior does not indicate confidence so much as anxiety about declining effectiveness. The Iran strike may therefore represent less the beginning of American omnipotence than the manifestation of strategic impatience, a belief that history must be accelerated before geopolitical trends turn unfavorable. Shortcuts, however, rarely stabilize complex regions. What comes after restraint? The true significance of February 2026 lies not in immediate escalation but in altered expectations. Adversaries must now assume American willingness to target leadership directly. Allies must consider association risks when escalation thresholds fall. Neutral states will hedge accordingly. Diplomacy conducted under assassination precedent becomes inherently brittle. Negotiation partners must trust survival even amid confrontation. That trust has weakened. Ironically, actions intended to reinforce deterrence may increase crisis instability by shortening perceived warning times. when leaders fear personal elimination, incentives favor rapid escalation rather than cautious bargaining. The enduring paradox: the United States remains the most powerful military actor in history. Yet power exercised without restraint alters the environment in which it operates. The killing of Iran's supreme leader demonstrated capability beyond dispute. Whether it strengthened the American strategic position remains uncertain. Hegemony depends not only on victory but on predictability. Allies follow powers they understand, rivals avoid wars whose boundaries appear stable. When boundaries blur, fear spreads indiscriminately, and fear is an unstable foundation for order. Conclusion: restrained, but transformed. Trump's Iran strike did not usher in an era of unlimited American dominance. It marked the transition from one philosophy of power to another. The post-1945 United States sought to lead through structured restraint, sometimes hypocritical, often violated, yet broadly recognizable. The emerging model relies more openly on coercive demonstration and personalized deterrence. America has not abandoned global leadership. It has altered the method by which leadership is asserted. Whether this transformation restores credibility or accelerates strategic fragmentation will depend less on the strike itself than on what follows: escalation, containment, or unintended proliferation. Great powers rarely recognize turning points while living through them. February 2026 may eventually appear as one, the moment when the world's strongest state concluded that restraint no longer secured obedience. History suggests such conclusions carry consequences extending far beyond their immediate targets. The death of one leader may therefore signify something larger, not the arrival of unrestrained American power, but the end of the era in which America believed power required restraint at all.